So I'm Reverend Nhien. Welcome to Unity Temple's weekly interspiritual service. Now, we just finished a series on wholeness and the Enneagram. If you're interested in that, please check it out on our YouTube channel. It's under my name, Nhien Vuong. And we are kind of in the middle, in between series. And so in the midst of that, I kind of checked in and was like, what is alive? What is alive for me spiritually? And my goodness, this theme that we're about to embark on via our upcoming series, Michael Singer's Untethered Soul, is so deeply alive in my practice that I decided that for today, we will also focus on the topic of surrender, and specifically spiritual surrender. Now, I would say that Unity, this service, being an interspiritual service, comes from the perspective that here in Unity, while we are deeply grounded in the teachings of Jesus, rather than say the teachings about Jesus, we do actively embrace practices and principles from the world's religious and spiritual traditions. And as we look at them, you can notice the trend in the midst of the spiritual traditions from around the world to say that almost every tradition has a practice of letting go, of surrender. And so it's just fascinating to me to see how these things that are universal can be brought home into this space in a way that becomes not just this highfalutin ideal, right? Spiritual surrender, that sounds pretty vast, but to be brought home in a way that is pragmatic and practical, like here in this space, how do we do that together? So today we're going to examine that by overlaying this broad notion of spiritual surrender on a map of consciousness known as the Enneagram, which is a psychological/spiritual tool for awakening and for personal growth. So I'm really excited to be exploring this topic with you today to look at how do we do this? How do we let go? And not just letting go as a giving up, but how do we let go in a way that enables this vastness of spirit, of love, of wisdom, and of power to rise forth from within us? So the sage, Confucius, there's a story told about how one day he entered a classroom of children. And he was known for these kind of modeling some illustrations on philosophy and how to live. So when he enters this classroom, he brings with him this big vase. It's like this big and it's curvy like this. It has this narrow neck. It's a beautiful vase. And then he takes off from the teacher's desk an apple. And he takes the apple and he drops it into the vase. And then he looks up at all the kids and he says, "Who here can retrieve the apple?" And then, so the story goes, there was this really kind of husky kid in the back. He's kind of big, strong. He marches up to the vase. He's like, "I can do it." And he comes up and he's like, "Give me that vase." Sticks his hand down. Keeps trying to pull, and he's trying to pull, but he can't pull his hand. As he grips the apple, he cannot pull his hand again out of the vase. So there he sits struggling. He's probably the strongest kid in the class, and he's frustrated because usually he can just use his brute strength to get what he wants. And so he sits there struggling and then finally looks up at Confucius, the teacher, and says, "Okay, I give up. How do you retrieve this apple?" And of course, Confucius gently, just softly walks over to the vase and then dumps the apple out. Relax and release. The spiritual teacher, Michael Singer, whose book series we're about to start in a couple weeks, says that is the feeling, the sensation of letting go. So if we can remember that, relax and release is the sensation of letting go spiritually. As I recalled the story, which I happened to read in this cute little biography of Confucius when I was about 11, I remembered that story when I read this little children's book on Confucius. And as I reflected back to that, I'm like, what in my life are the apples that I am grasping for in the first place? So that's my first question to all of you, because this is nothing if it's not relevant to what is alive and of interest to all of you. What are you grasping for right now in your life? What are you seeking? Is it a very specific thing, a specific kind of response from one important person in your life? A call back after that date, a reconciliation with a family member. Maybe what you're grasping for in this moment of your life is a sense of physical well-being. And you feel that that's what eludes you, and somehow you're going to be better and okay when finally you achieve this level of health or vitality or strength. Maybe what you're grasping for is more financial, in that it's either, on the one hand, just getting by, right? And that you're not going to be okay, you don't think, until you got that basic level of financial security. Or maybe for you, objectively in the world that you have more in finances than most people. But what you are grasping for is a sense of having enough. And it seems like the more you accumulate in finances or in worldly success, you still somehow don't have enough, and you're grasping for more. And you're efforting and you're striving like that little boy, striving and trying and gripping and trying to hold on to that thing. And maybe what you're grasping for is actually like for this boy in your hand, but the grasping is an attachment to it and a holding on to it. And it's sort of like you don't even want to move on and do anything else because you don't want to lose this thing that you have. And all your forces are geared toward that, right? He won't even let go. He's not free. His hand is in the vase, right? He's stuck there. So we begin with that. To even approach the question of spiritual surrender or letting go demands that each of us take a good look at those things that we hold on to and those things that we are currently grasping for in a way in particular that keeps us from our peace, that keeps us from our joy. And we know it, right? Intellectually, we know that, this isn't the way, but if only they would change, if only the situation would differ, and we keep working to grab onto that. So as we consider the people or the things in our lives that we seek to hold on to and grasp for the future as well as the present, or the things that we seek and are still seem to be slipping out of our hands, as we each consider that, I want to bring up the topic for today in a threefold manner and begin by asking the question, what is spiritual surrender in the first place? We'll start with what it is and maybe a little bit of what it isn't. Because a lot of us have some odd, we have stories around the word surrender. For many of us, that's not a good idea. Surrender, it's like what weaklings do, right? And so how do we frame that in a context of empowerment? And not self-empowerment in the little self, not the egoic self, but the larger self, the spiritual self. How that self gets empowered by this act of spiritual surrender. So what is spiritual surrender? And then second, why do we care? Why do we want to do it? What is it that the world's traditions teach us around the value of spiritual surrender? And then finally, again, like I've been to so many places where they're like, surrender. I'm like, but how? And so today, what I want to share is this very practical overlay that the Enneagram can offer us by taking a look at 9 faces of how we refuse to surrender. Because if surrender is about going into sort of reality as it is, surrendering to reality as it is, then a way we can do it is actually look at each of our barriers to that. And so, instead of trying to surrender, we simply look at where our barriers are, where we're blocked. And so let's begin with this. What is surrender? But Cynthia Bourgeault basically says, this is really important. Well, first of all, surrender is not capitulation. It's not, for those of us especially who can feel like, God, I never get my way. Surrender is not about relinquishing your way for someone else's way. That is a way that ego surrenders. I'll explain a little bit more in a second. So it's not about like, okay, I want to go to the ice cream shop and you want to go to the pie store for dessert, and okay, there's a part of me that I want to please you, and so I'll go to the pie store. Did I say I want ice cream? I want both. I want pie and I want ice cream. So surrender is about releasing, either like what I want. Is that what surrender is about? Maybe not. So not about capitulating to someone else's way. Okay, so how odd if that's not it. Nor is it about resignation to a certain life situation. And how many of us have do it? He's just that way. Just leave it alone. How many people have advised someone else to do that? And I'm not saying that there isn't value in just sort of releasing that. I'm just saying that that's not exactly what we mean when we resign ourselves to say, you know what? The world is just, politics are just corrupt. It's just that way. And so we just surrender to it. That's not what we mean by spiritual surrender. Not just this like resignation into the way a situation or a story is. And so if it's not that, what exactly do we mean by surrender? What we mean is that if you're willing to set aside the story of a situation, like, oh, this is either about me getting my way or you getting your way, or this is about a story about how people are, or how people suck, or how people are mean, or how people are cruel in the world, like there's a story here. And if we can release that, then what happens is, John, surrender is a conscious embracing of what is. What does that mean? Because we are so trained to not be in the now and in what is. When we look at a situation, that's what we see. This is a situation that I have a story around. But what if in every moment we trusted life so deeply that we could surrender to the moment exactly as it is? And Cynthia Bourgeault teaches actually that we can never spiritually surrender to a situation. I don't surrender to the fact that my spouse or my daughter or my son is an addict. I don't surrender to a situation. I surrender to the moment. I surrender to the now. And I allow the now, the power that all the great mystics teach, that is only in that eternal now, to then arise in me and then move forward into the next moment, into speech, into action that is right and appropriate. But the paradox is that can't happen while I am examining the situation, because I am only seeing it through the certain lens of my egoic structure, and I am not seeing it from the perspective of this higher vantage point, which is the vantage point of spirit. And so let's take a look even of like what that deeply means. When we go into the idea of the Enneagram, we'll be able to examine like, what does that actually mean for me? And why, again, do I want it? So why is it important to spiritually surrender? There's this idea that the highest level of maturity is actually surrendering to reality as it is. But almost every wisdom tradition tells us that even though we think we perceive reality with a capital R, most of us are actually seeing it through our lens. And so until we're not able to actually grasp the full wisdom, the full love, and the full power of a moment, until in any moment we are willing to surrender our barriers to that moment. And so the Enneagram can actually help us trace those barriers. But first, why do so? The idea is this, that number one, we are able to most skillfully respond to life, most magnificently respond, not from the perspective of our own limited body of knowledge and our limited perspective from me, as a 5'1.5" woman in the world. It's only shorter people that add those little half inches, right? But from this perspective, the world looks a certain way. And I'm not open to a larger perspective. Because from this perspective, from my ego, the world looks a certain way. And I'll expand on that in a sec. So this idea that we will actually get to see through God's eyes, not to anthropomorphize God, but not to do that, but to kind of look at it from the universe's eyes, spirit's eyes, from the perspective of the whole. And any one of us who has ever managed to have that moment of release, for instance, any of you who have, like me, been involved in a 12-step program of recovery, know that the first 3 steps, step 1, 2, and 3, can be summarized in these 3 brief statements. I can't, God can, let God. And in those statements, to me, embodies the spiritual practice of surrender, that for those of us who have worked a program, understand that somehow I of my own will, I of my own intelligence, I of all of the capacity and strength that I have mustered and gained all my life cannot seem to effect the change that I want. But somehow, when I submit and surrender to a power and a wisdom and a love greater than myself, then miracles happen. And things that I could not change of my own egoic being, not my spiritual self, but my ego self, willfully grabbing for what I think I want and need, doesn't accomplish that. So the value of spiritual surrender is that we tap into this grace. We tap into that, God, I can't solve this problem. Good, the moment I say I can't, the ego I, can't, then I'm willing to submit to something bigger than me that maybe possibly can. And that's scary, right? Because what is that thing? I'm not quite aware of its contours because it's bigger than me. So by nature, it's infinite and it's vast and it's unknown. And so, but in that act, time and time again, in this tradition, in 12-step, but in every spiritual tradition, I read an article in the yogic tradition that Patanjali, as a teacher, said that, it's like this spiritual buffet we have. How many different spiritual practices are we teaching nowadays? And they're like, surrender, it said, is the trump card. It's the trump card in that. It's almost like you don't have to do anything else. If you practice surrender in every moment, then this presence and this being arises. But this is all fine and dandy for those who know how to do it, and so there's this piece of I think I'm surrendering, I have this I thought I surrendered it, but I can tell I didn't because now, so-and-so called again and I'm aggravated again, I thought I surrendered, and so how do we do it? What I love about the Enneagram is it maps sort of that, We thought we surrendered, but we're holding on to something. But have you ever, have you noticed that when you hold on to something very, very close and you're looking out, you don't even know that thing is there, right? Because your vision is that way. It's like that. The Enneagram tells us like what is so close to us that it's like who we are, so that we don't even realize we haven't surrendered. We don't even realize it's blocking us because it's like right here and I'm looking here, right? So let's look into what that might be for each of the types. So we begin by looking at an overview of the Enneagram. And I know that some of you may not know the Enneagram at all, so know that I'm going to structure this so that even if you don't know it, you can gain value from just even kind of clicking in on like what you're most connected to here. So Father Thomas Keating presented these three emotional programs for happiness. And that each of us, well, we all want all of it. We all want power and control. We all want esteem and approval. We all want security and certainty. But there is a way in which certain personality types become a little bit more like we hold it really close. Like this is what we really, really want, and such that our whole identity gets crafted without us even realizing. We don't even realize, like, if you boil down everything I'm seeking and everything that upsets me, it falls into that category. And so for those who do know the Enneagram, those who are associated with types 8, 9, and 1 on the top there, have a fixation, kind of an issue. I'm one of those types with power and control. And the situations that will upset me the most is when somebody is trying to tell me what to do. Yeah, like really? You don't have this so this stance is not surrender. Just, but do you have that? Like, really? Yeah, you feel that, right? Power and control. If you're one of those types, even if you don't know the Enneagram, you may feel into, how big is that for me? How big is that for me? And is that why I'm so angry at this situation? Because someone's trying to control me or I can't control the situation. 891. And so the next area is 234's, approval and esteem. I can't do that. What will they think of me? Right? Does that drive you? Or I want to do that because I want everyone to think I'm the best. But what they think of me could be very soft and gentle. It's not just about ambition and success. It's that I want to be seen as a good person. I want to be seen as a giving person. I want to be seen as a unique person, a special person. Those are the issues of the 2, 3, 4 types on the Enneagram. So core that it can be the reason that we grasp or hold on to a situation rather than surrendering to the moment. We're telling the story and we're clinging to the story and we're going to write the story. And in the story, we're the good guys, right? In this story, we're approved of, we're valuable because they say so. And so this is the type that tends to look outward for people's affirmations. Yes, you are special. Yes, you are awesome and accomplished and successful, and you're brilliant, right? But I don't know who I am inside and value without your affirmation, so I must continually seek and grasp for it. And then the final group is 5s, 6, and 7s on the Enneagram. And those types are preoccupied with security and certainty. Sometimes we want to use the word safety also. And so there's always that what am I going to grab for that helps me to feel safe? Sometimes I grab for a relationship that helps me to feel secure. But other times it's financial, right? And that the times when I'm most thrown off is when I feel uncertain or insecure in those ways. And so that becomes my preoccupation and my grasping. And because of that, I can't surrender to the moment because I want these things so badly that I'm either, like usually at the top, against the moment. No, the moment doesn't contain this. I don't feel in control. And I certainly don't want to be controlled. I'm resisting the moment. I'm resisting like what is in that moment. So even though I feel powerful because my anger is aggravated, so if I'm powerful, I've actually lost my seat of power because I'm in my egoic structure. So, where was I? Power. Controlled. Gosh darn it. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Mine is too hard. Okay, so esteem and approval, right? You know, if I can't, like, get this, if I can't get you to like me, why do you think I'm such a bad person? You know, we've seen that where it's like, I can't control what you think of me. Like, if we're so preoccupied with that, we can't, like, be in the present moment where, wow, what if, like, a deeper love can reside in there, right? Like, what if in the present moment, actually, the infinite love of the divine is actually fully available to me? That's actually what we teach here in Unity, that divine love is everywhere present within you. But so long as you're grasping, you can't relax and release into the knowing that that's already there. Right? Certainty and security, all the researching and the trying and the trouble spotting and all the ways in which the mind gets occupied, and it's like, uh-oh. Like I can't, the knowledge and the wisdom and the guidance that I'm seeking from God, from Spirit, the knowing that I want, I can't even have, because I'm only trying to find it in my way in this moment. You know, whether you have a medical diagnosis, and I've seen people in the 5, 6, 7 quadrant in particular, like, oh no, I'm going to figure out all of this because the doctors don't know, you know, like, and so, but the knowing or the seeking for knowing is going to help me feel okay, you know, the endless researching or trouble spotting, or for certain of these types, I'm not really okay with the situation. I'm not okay with the now. And so I'm going to plan positively for the future. And that can look like, oh, this is, you know, I accept my good, but it's always in the future. And so that's actually another corollary to not surrendering to the moment as it is, and all the beauty and glory and love and fulfillment that all of us know we can't live in the future and we can't live in the past. We know this intellectually. And yet how often do we resist surrendering to this moment, right? So let's look at even more deeply how each of us does this. So for those in my area, 8, 9s, 1s, woo, you know, 8, 9, 1s, power and control, that type gets overoccupied with taking action to fix, to exert control, or to push away control from others, and to exercise worldly power, and to resist being overpowered by others in the world. And so the surrender is the surrender of misguided action in the world. And the way that I summarized it in there is that for the Enneagram Type 8, before you can really surrender to the now, you have to be willing to surrender your overdoing, right? And to be able to surrender your overpowering of a situation. And the Type 8 is like, boom. It is like that boy that was like so strong that says, I'm going to grab for it. And in this misguided way, it was like, oh, I will use all my force. And in fact, an 8 gone awry is going to be the one, well, that didn't work. Let me get out my hammer and break the vase. Only to realize that by breaking the vase, you're actually cracking the apple too, right? And that's what happens when the 8 overpowers and overdoes. And so there has to be a restraint of energy, consenting to stillness within. That is the 8's withdrawal, because the 8 will overdo. So to compensate for that, in order to bring it to the now, we got to swing to the other side of the pendulum and practice consenting to stillness. And in that consent, this like, it balances out the overpowering and overdoing. And for that type, here's where it's challenging. To other people, this is just normal stillness. To the 8, it feels like I'm stuck. Like to the 8, it feels like softness and weakness. And will somebody just please do something? And so that's where we have to see how the compulsions of each type have to be actually backed up, like brought back by a swing on the pendulum, right? And so it's going to feel like, oh, I'm not overpowering. Oh, pull it back, right? And for the next type, the 9, there's a way that it overdoes efforts at peace. And so the 9 structure is designed to make the situation comfortable or peaceful and harmonious, right? And so in that, there is a resistance to what is. Life as it is filled with energetic conflict, right? So let's say life is the ocean. If life is the ocean and you are a 9 and you're judging it from the 9 point, oh my God, those waves are just crashing against each other. Stop already. Calm the tidal waves. I mean, really, it's like that. It's like saying or you can feel into what if it's one ocean? What if God is the ocean and these waves are not actually, even though they're hitting each other, that's actually not conflict in a bad sense. That's just the movement of life in its beauty, in its fiery, in its glory. But the 9 is like, dude, they're hitting each other. I gotta stop this, right? And so in that, there's a compulsion to act. And now it can look like 9s are these, it's all so beneficent that I am serving to trying to bring peace and harmony to the situation, to my family, to all these things. But really, it's because the 9's energy becomes so merged with everything around it that the 9 itself is uncomfortable, right? And so it's like, I want to stop that because I'm uncomfortable. But if as a type 9, in the midst of what feels conflictual, even in your circumstances, your surroundings, like too bright of lighting. I mean, it could be something like that even. It doesn't have to be people quarreling, but it often is. Like when there are people not agreeing, it is a moment of deep distress for the 9. But when the 9 type can resist mediating peace, right, and engage, because here's the issue. The 9's like, I'm just going to back off here. So the 9's like the opposite of the 8 in that, right? They're going to back off and disengage so that they can feel peaceful even if there's conflict. But what if you can engage stillness? Not go there, not try to make the peace. Then perhaps you can enter reality in the moment as it is without the compulsion to harmonize what you, in your judgment, perceive as a war in the universe. But what do you really know? Speaking of what people really know, we'll get to the 1s now, which is my type on the Enneagram. The 1s tend to think they know what's best for everyone. And so the 1s take action in the world and have to resist misguided action. And the action is like, I scan for what's imperfect, because I know what's the ideal reality. And then I endeavor and take action to perfect the world, right? Sometimes it looks like perfecting myself. Sometimes it looks like perfecting you. Sometimes it looks like perfecting the picture on the wall. But there is this compulsion to act, to change, to do, to perfect. That, what is that? But a resistance to reality as it is. And I don't get it, because I think that I'm actually making things better, right? But instead what I'm doing is that I haven't embraced what is as this innate wholeness and perfection. And I haven't trusted that in the knowing of that, I'm not going to become complacent. I'm actually going to be inspired to right action in the next moment. But it only happens if I'm willing to resist my compulsion to fix, right? To perfect. And then we go into let's go into the heart types. So for the heart types, the issue of surrendering approval seeking goes across all 2, 3s, and 4s. if that's your issue, like, like everything's really about like how they see you or how they don't see you, And for the 2 on the Enneagram, which is known as the giver, it's about giving up, like giving or loving outwardly. I say outwardly, because love needs to happen inwardly for the 2. And then, so the 2 strategy is, in this situation, if I can be helpful and if I can give, things will be better and I will feel okay. But, rather than sitting in the discomfort of really kind of coming into my own solitude, if you will, and so sort of consenting to solitude within my being. So the practice of, where stillness was the corollary to the body types on top there, these heart types here are about solitude. Why? Because they're approval seeking. You need to have that sort of solitude in order to not have that mirror back of like who you think you are. Like you're not going to know that, right? But so long as you don't do that, you're perpetually not surrendering to situations where people don't think of you what you want them to think of you. And so you suffer. 3 suffer, in that there's a constant striving to accomplish or succeed. The striving to do. And do by outer standards. Check off the boxes. What does my organization think is ideal? I'll do that. What does the world mark as success? I'll check those off. And anything that thwarts my way, I am not surrendered to, right? You are in my way if you are in the way of my goal as a 3. And then the 3 doesn't realize, like, I have to actually, be willing to sort of like engage this solitude here, and just really be in this space. And the reason engagement is so important, is that it's this idea that for the 3, when you stop doing, you're normally resting, right? So 3s, we're like, I'm resting, but I'm resting from doing so I can do more, which is different from engaging the solitude as its own innate, valuable thing. This moment valuable in and of itself, as opposed to a time of rest so I can do more. Very fine distinction, right? Then finally, the 4 in this. And this is this like unrealistic idealism and longing. There's this image I have inside, and the world will never meet that, and so I want maybe ideally a partner, someone who will reflect back that even though I don't have that I'm okay. Like there's an interesting way in which, so this type is not so action-oriented, even though it kind of sounds like the one's idealism, but it is more about having this being reflected back, and it's by having these ideals set forth. Like the 4 can be like, well, what can help me keep this image of like being special is I have unique things in my house. Or I have unique artistic talents, special. Like this idea, but you never live up to it and nobody ever lives up to it. So there's always this sense of longing. So this moment could be better. In my story it's better. My story is very romantic often, right? Could be better. And so in that, the acceptance of what is, the surrender to the now, doesn't take place. It can't take place until the 4 is willing to say, actually, I've set it up to fail. There's a part of me that wants to suffer. And it's only in recognizing that can I kind of journey into a better space. And then finally, the head types, the thinking types, surrender, stinking thinking. These are all my words, very eloquent, I know. It's like stinking thinking. So that comes from 12-step quite a bit. And so for the 5, there's this compulsion quest to know. And so in this moment, if you just don't know all the things you want to know about that situation, can you be happy? And if you can't, like when are you going to know enough? Like when will you ever know enough to be happy, to feel content, to feel competent and worthy, like you can step into the world, to receive the gift of the eternal now, a 5 must release the need to know, right? To have the answers. And then for the 6, there is a compulsion to protect, secure your life and the life of those you love. And you're going to do that, you think, by always thinking about the future and what potential dangers can happen. Dangers on any level, physical danger, financial dangers, whatever it is. And so that barrier to presence, to surrendering to the gift of your life right now, must be continually released so that the presence of God and the presence of even divine wisdom to guide you into future action can arise. But we first must be aware that you're doing it. So often we do it as a matter of course. All these things are like, this is what we do. This is who we are, is what it feels like. Instead of recognizing, oh, okay. Oh, that's actually kind of like an extra thing. You know, I can look down now and see it's right here. But like maybe if I set it aside, oh my goodness, look at the world. This vast, amazing, beautiful world in this moment, in which I am fully safe and secure in this moment. Can I feel into that and let that live and let the joy of that arise for me by at least occasionally being willing to surrender forecasting for threats? And then finally, the 7, chronic mental escapism. The 7 is the type that focuses on future joy, right? And in that is sort of like, oh, I want to think about all the exciting ideas, right? Like, but not now. Now is barren. Now is boring, you know. But so I'll be in the room, but I'll be thinking about the 5 other things that I could be doing instead. And I'm always doing that. So when am I actually ever going to receive the gift of the moment? And so with all of that, you know, I'm going to bring our time together to a close, knowing that we're going to spend a good 6 weeks delving into this practice of surrender more right after Easter next week, because it is a complicated topic that we want to flesh out. But this is just the invitation to start looking at which of those 9 pieces, if you don't know your Enneagram type, tends to be like your thing. You're like, oh, I know. That's why I'm unhappy, because I haven't surrendered that. And if I surrender that, then maybe I can actually let go in the way that enables spirit to let go and let the spirit that indwells in me, not some God up there, but the spirit that indwells in me, the divine wisdom and love that indwells in me, to do its thing. Okay, what can I get out of the way? What can I surrender so that in this moment, I could actually be at peace. I could actually feel the love around me. I could actually know that my sense of power and control. What do I need to surrender in order to be in the now? Thank you, each one of you, for joining us today. Again, as you embark in your life in this week, I pray that each one of you is able to surrender that which keeps you from your present good, like this moment of joy, of love, and of beauty. And if you could trust that the act of surrender could actually give you that, even one time during the week. So I hold that with and for you.